back to jailbreaking though, in reference to the EU and everything. I'm actually glad. I think this is something because, like we were talking about earlier, jailbreaking is getting pro and kind of iffy. It's one of those you can potentially break your phone, and why it's not hard. It requires some things that can be intimidating to grandma. With this ruling now, there's now a web-based jailbreak for the iPhone, which
Yes.
I actually like.
Yes.
There's some pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
And one of the big cons to this is between this and some other stuff. And I find it funny that all the fanboys who went out of their way to talk about the fact that Germany was doing an audit of Google's collection of map data and Wi-Fi hotspots, which hurt nobody, because it was just random packet here, random packet there that just never got deleted. But nobody, or none of these sites or people are talking about the fact that because of this, the iPhone 4s are one of the devices that have made Germany's security advisory list of devices. You know, they recommend people not.
Okay.
So you weren't aware of that?
No.
Yeah. Say, what is there? I got a link there on it somewhere. It's the Apple fix for iOS PDF exploit in pipeline. It's like the German government has issued an official warning about iPhone's 4s because there's a potential security exploit here. Kind of a backdoor thing, which is potentially really critical. It's, you know, again, in some European countries, the mentality is it's the government's responsibility to protect the citizens. The citizens should not protect themselves.
Wow. Okay, so it's a remote PDF exploit.
Yeah, well, and this is related to the jailbreaking and other stuff because effectively, what you theoretically could do is combine this with the PDF and then get into other stuff. You could backdoor in taking control of somebody's phone.
You know, Safari, I mean, I know it's a Safari jailbreak.
Right.
Let's say, but Safari has been a big vulnerability, even for OS X. Just loopholes and exploits within Safari that, have been demonstrated in some of these hacker conferences.
Well, no, and I'm honestly glad that Apple chose not to fight that battle. Because what they could have said to every browser that was supported to the iOS platform was, well, this duplicates Safari, therefore it's not allowed. I'm glad they didn't try and fight that battle. A, federal regulators wouldn't have liked it. But B, people who really are concerned about this stuff, that is the best solution for it. To load Opera or other browsers. I honestly don't know. I know Opera's available on iOS 4. I know Firefox. Firefox isn't there yet. Are there others besides Opera?
Yeah, I had one and I forget the name of it, to be honest with you. And it was sold in the App Store and touted as being faster than Safari, and I used it and it was nice. I forget the name of it, something or other. But yeah, there's a couple of them out there. But Firefox is not on there, and
Firefox Mobile is still in ridiculous alpha testing. It's not something I would put on a device unless you're just a geek. That's at this point.
And even if IE had a mobile version, I wouldn't use it. I don't use IE on desktop. So, I mean, yeah, I did not download Opera. I don't. My wife owns the iPhone now, so I sold my iPhone 3G. So
yeah, I know.
So I don't have any particular use or testing of the browser now, but that's interesting with Safari.
Well, no, and I know why it made it. I just find it funny that it was okay to bash on Google for something as a lot less innocuous, but yet.
Well, let's be. I mean, in the war of Apple versus anything, it draws a very clear line in the sand, and I think people such as myself, are far and few between. Usually, it's very, very much so Apple, or very much against Apple.
Right.
And Apple just breeds that. The people want to tag it as like, you arrogant SOBs. And look, see, your products aren't as superior. So look, you've got an exploit. And then of course, Apple is like saying, we are. The Apple side is like, yes, we are superior. See how many problems you guys have. So.
Well, no. I really wish Apple would stop that whole mentality, because they're not really any better than anyone else. In some ways, they're more susceptible than some others because of that arrogance and because of that ignorance. I haven't published it yet. We talked about this when we did Linux on Tuesday, which is, I almost feel, and this goes for Linux users too, that Apple platform, and in some cases Linux users, are more vulnerable to this stuff because they buy into the mentality that they're more secure, which means they don't do basic common sense that they should.
Linux is a more secure model than if we're talking about versus Windows.
Well, no, and here's the thing: inherently out of the sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I think what you're gonna say is like inherently they're more secure, but inherently more secure does not mean immune. And the problem is, and the problem is the sales pitch to the end user is inherently more secure means you're immune. So they don't exercise the common sense they should and do on a Windows system, which then.
Let me point that out. I've been in IT for a long time, and while today Windows has patched a lot and fixed a lot, they still have these ridiculously idiotic loopholes, such as the last bug, which has exploited a network protocol that is still as old as Windows 2000 that they never bothered changing. The identical worms with different names that exploited Apache versus IIS within the Linux model could not propagate anywhere near the entire system that became compromised under Windows via Internet Information Server.
Right.
I lived it, and I was happy to see it was an easy and quick fix if I was attacked by the Slapper worm and/or versus Code Red for Windows. And no, I do think that there are differences, and I would go as far as to say that I definitely use OS 10 today because I do find it a better software suite than I do Windows, and the same goes with Linux.
Same reason I use Linux. It's like I get annoyed when I have to go use Windows, but I still use it from time to time.
And so I would be lying if I wouldn't say, hey, there are differences and there are better points, but Apple doesn't have to go about it. Some of the points that Apple makes, yes, I find ridiculous, and that's why I do make YouTube videos saying, look, Apple fans, don't argue this point, argue this point. These are the points that you can use to stick it against Windows, not point X, Y, and Z that seem to be so popular. But I also give a lot of kudos to Windows of late, in that they are really trying.
Windows patched a lot of things as of late. There are some things they've patched that I have very mixed feelings about, like the fact that they've patched and guarded against rootkits. Largely, there's still one or two minor security holes there, but for the most part, rootkits are almost impossible in Windows now. However, that has me a little concerned, because one of the first things I do on a system, because I am in IT industry, I'm a little secure, is I go in and effectively put in a rootkit of my own, which is a really good firewall and other tools like that, and sandboxing environments and things like that, which without the ability to put in rootkits, you can't put this stuff in, and you have to leave it up to Microsoft to create something comparable to the security tools that you had access to pre that lock-in, which it's happening, but it's happening slowly. So it's out of the box security is more, but its overall complete security capability is less. It's a real iffy thing to argue, because on the one hand, I understand the average end user was not doing this. So their solution for the lowest common denominator fixes the problem more so, but it takes away tools that were at the end user's disposal. It's like there is no equivalent in a 64-bit version of Windows and Windows Vista or Windows 7 to doing the equivalent of Sandbox IE and other things like that. There's just not a way to do it anymore until Microsoft decides to add this to the OS.
Well, I know their server core and foundation cores, they're trying to address that, at least at the enterprise level, to shed all the unnecessary.
But this is something I think should be accessible to grandma at the base user level, just because by virtue of where you get applications from and other stuff, you should initially run it in some type of sandbox environment and make sure it's not doing anything crazy.
Sure. Well, and Windows is doing that. I think their driver model and sandboxing drivers, I am definitely seeing the results of their work behind that within Windows that I've seen. I really love. They've prevented a tremendous amount of memory dumping, and have been able to just completely shut down the service and restart it. And
nice to see Windows finally be able to do that without locking the whole system up. Took them long enough.
I mean, I've seen it. It doesn't work all the time, but it's definitely
it's getting there.
I've definitely seen it and experienced it. But I wouldn't say that they're rootkit immune. I mean, they're notorious for these idiotic protocol and open ports just happen to go, oh yeah, we forgot about that, and it dates back to 2002. And golly, we'll go ahead and
well, no, and that right there is a perfect example of the stuff I was talking about. I've even when Microsoft started including that annoy the hell out of you security suite, I still preferred, at the time, Zone Alarm. I'm not sure I recommend Zone Alarms as much as I used to, just because of what they've begun to turn into. They used to be the standard by which all Windows firewalls were judged. They're not so much that anymore. But it's like your checklist for Windows was add a good antivirus, add a good spyware tool, add a good sandboxing tool, add a good firewall. And some of that stuff you can't do as much as you used to. And what surprises the hell out of me is that this isn't the checklist for a Mac and Linux user. And even though, yes, there are no viruses, for the most part, there's very few viruses in the wild for Unix and Linux systems. But there are a few. And
there used to be a lot of them.
There used to be a lot of them when it was predominant, and that's the thing that scares me. I'm like, if you make this the user mentality when it isn't a problem, it never will get to be. It will be kept largely in track, because the reason everybody does that now is because it became such a problem in Windows. If the mentality carries over from people coming from Windows to Mac and Linux to decide, I'm going to keep doing these things, even though they're not really necessary at this point, but I'm going to keep them my behavior so that they never become necessary, and as this grows in market share, it doesn't inherit all these problems.
Yeah, even with my parents and my wife, I don't let them run in admin mode, and actually their everyday users are just standard users within the user shell. So basically in OS 10, and I believe Linux can do the same. You know, if the user shell is infected, you can cut it out.
The difference is it's admin users versus root user, but yeah, it's the same thing, just different words.